Hello everyone from the Studio 10 in Kilkenny. Another episode Coffee with Ania, but today very special. My guest is Rebecca de Havilland. I see like your picture in internet. Happy, independent, beautiful woman, very proud and very successful as well. Can you just tell me your story?
It's interesting that you do talk about that part of my life, because until the age of 7, my mum and dad separated. My dad actually really left my mum when we were very, very young. I do come from a very kind of middle class, Middle Ireland family. And I suppose whatever way it was kept from us, I don't ever remember at that stage not having a father or not a father being present. But years later, like kind of talking to my mum, there was shame upon her because even back then, it would have been classed, she would have been blamed that he left.
Yes.
It was her fault that he left. But and I remember my mum then going to Dublin to college because she wanted to do catering, because my granddad was a baker and had his own bakery, and we had a grocery shop and we had farm stuff and all that, and a lot of land and stuff like that. So I didn't really know any difference, but I knew that Granny raised us from up until the age of 7. I went to the convent school in Granard. It was a mixed school, so for me it was normal.
Yes.
The only thing that was abnormal for me then was, I remember being brought to Frank the barber to have my hair cut. And to me, that was so stressful, and so it just caused so much. I seemingly used to lose the plot. I never knew for years later, it was I wanted long hair.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Anyway, my granny would let me kind of put neck curtains on my hair and pretend I had long hair. She would give me the bunty to read. I would cut out the dolls on the back. I would play with the dolls. Like I was a middle child as well. So my sister, I call us the Irish triplets, right? Literally. My sister was born April 57. I'm June 58 and my brother is July 59. And I often thank the Lord that my dad left when he did, because God knows how many of us there would be at that stage. So, and there is the middle child syndrome, I think, as well. You know, there definitely is, because you're neither the eldest or the youngest. Do you know what I mean? You're the middle one.
Yes.
And I remember even from a very young age, like being very good in school, you know, in the convent, and I started doing Irish dancing, and the only reason I did Irish dancing, let's face it, I got to wear a kilt.
Ah.
And for me, that was my skirt.
And then you can feel free.
And then I felt free. Do you know what I mean? And it was old money at the time. I remember it was sixpence, and it was a Saturday morning, and I absolutely adored it. And I adored my life in Granard to the age of 7. I made my communion at 6. And my sister made it the year before, and she had this lovely, lovely white communion dress. I think it was the only time ever in my life that I was jealous.
Yeah.
Because I wanted that dress.
Of course.
But I did manage a year later to manipulate, and I do use the word manipulate, Granny into, I said, I am not wearing the grey suits that the boys are wearing. And I was made quite clear that there was no way I was wearing the dress. But I managed to get white shorts, white shirt, little royal dicky bow, and a royal blue jacket with silver buttons on. I was as happy as... I remember walking up the aisle, hands, you know, the communion thing, and nobody passing any remarks. That to me was an idyllic childhood. And then, almost like I was 6 and I would have been 7 in June. And then next of all, myself and my brother were carted off to Dublin and put into a boarding school. And it was an all boys boarding school. Oh, and for me, that was the first time I could probably say that I felt I'm a boy.
Yeah, and that was really early with, you know, like very young children.
7.
It's like I can't imagine even,
And the only thing I can think of is my mum was the youngest of 8, so I think when Granny was actually looking after us at that stage, and she was a wonderful granny, but she must have been in her 70s and having to look after 3 kids. Like when you're in your 70s, you don't want to be looking after 3 kids.
Yeah, that's actually true.
Let's face it. Do you know what I mean?
Like I'm 40 and
yeah.
You know.
Yes. I'm a granny now and I'm in my 60s and I couldn't imagine having 3 little kind of screaming kids around me, So,
no.
And there again, it was quite normal for kids to be put into boarding school from the family I would have come from. Maybe not as early as 7. But I wasn't long in boarding school, and this is the bit that I'm coming to that you were talking about. And it was shocking. I can't, time-wise, I couldn't tell you, but I know it was very, very, very. I wasn't long in boarding school when I was sexually abused, and it was by 2 Christian brothers. So when one was finished with me, I was sent to the other. It still gets to me today. It's something that you don't ever get over.
No.
And I remember being like kind of stripped down to my shorts and things, and it was just horrendous, and I was covered in blood, and then that never happened again, that part of it, because I think they were so scared of what had happened. But this abuse was to go on I was 11 and a half when they stopped. I was 7 when they started. And then even when I was 11 and a half, and when it stopped, I thought I had done something wrong because every time they abused me, and it was a daily thing, they would say it was my fault, that I was making them do this, that I was an evil child. And I believed it. I mean, why wouldn't I? I was a child.
You was only a child.
And the thing is, I didn't have, and I suppose this is sometimes where my mum had, at this stage, had become a career woman. And when you come from a family like a Catholic, whether we were, like kind of staunch Catholic or not, which we weren't, but you still kind of, parents still trusted.
Yes. For their belief.
Yes, And I remember like going home at weekends, like to Dublin, and I couldn't sit down because of the damage had been done. And remember my Auntie Sybil saying to me, for God's sake, will you sit down? You're like the 7 churches walking up. And I knew I couldn't tell anybody because I was also warned if I told anybody, it would be me that would get into trouble. It would be me that caused this, and I could be put away somewhere even worse. When you're 7, then 8, then 9. I made my confirmation, I think I was 9. And I remember even making my confirmation and thinking, God can see me, do you know what I mean? And I'm the devil's child, because that's how it felt. Then I left school, I left boarding school, I was just at turn 12. And then went to Turner College, which was a rugby school, and people would go, oh my God. But in actual fact, by the time I came out at the age of 12, I went in a very, very innocent country child, and came out as a 12-year-old knowing a lot more than I should, and very damaged. And very damaged in a sense that I couldn't show it. So I think from those years of that happening to me, I somewhere along the line became a really good liar.
Yeah.
And a good faker, because I had to fake so much. So when I went into Turner College was great. I had great fun there in a sense of, it was a great time for me too. It was very revolutionary in Ireland, even in the UK.
It was 70s.
It was 70s.
Full of colours.
I was 13 in 1971, And I know they all go on today about non-binary and gender fluidity and all of this. We had David Bowie.
Yeah.
And it was just... But anyway, I got expelled from Turner College because at this stage I had gotten to hate school so much.
Yes.
And I think from being abused in boarding school, I had become a bit of a dunce.
Yeah.
Which I hadn't been in the convent. So Granny decided to put me in hairdressing because I was always playing with dolls and I loved hair and it was wonderful. And I did. And I remember starting in hairdressing. It was the first unisex hair salon in Dublin. You know, up to this, like kind of guys went to barbers or women went to hair saloons. So to be in this unisex hair salon and do it was just magical.
For how many years you worked by being the hairdresser?
At 7, I went in, I think I was 15 and a half by the time I got expelled.
Yeah.
And at 17, I won Young Hairdresser of the Year. So I was still in apprenticeship, but I won this competition, which gave me a scholarship in London in Vidal Sassoon and L'Oreal.
Wow, that's
which was
big,
quite,
actually.
that was quite good. And put up in a hotel in Mayfair for the year. So when I got to London, I started, like, this was also like kind of mid-70s, you know, and London in mid-70s, oh my God, it was amazing. It was such, like, I thought I was the hip kid, the hip teenager in Dublin, going to the Dandelion Market and hanging out and wearing platforms and doing the whole thing. Then you hit London and it's a whole other ball game. Then all of a sudden you realise Dublin's about 10 years behind.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's where I kind of started to see that there was different not even so much different genders.
And you can express yourself in that way.
I saw gay people.
Yeah.
I saw different things, you know, and I was still kind of very afraid of the gay thing because I identified it with the priests, with the Christian brothers. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But I excelled in my... And I think
in Ireland it was illegal to be a...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was up until 1993.
Very long time.
Very long time. So I think somewhere psychologically in my head, I had found something I was good at and that I excelled at.
Yes.
And that I wasn't a dunce anymore. So hairdressing became my world. And of course I was working on girls and I was working in David Marshall's and I was working on models. Yeah. And I think...
You have your own agency models, yeah?
Yeah, I did.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it was like... And I think as well, even with my agency, I think I lived my life through them. It was, you know... But like my career took off so much, so fast and... Like I then was a celebrity hair and makeup artist and all. I did makeup, everything. I was doing the likes of all like Image magazine, It magazine, and then in London I did Vogue, Harper's and Queen. Oh, like, I mean, it was...
I didn't know you know, because when I started my adventure with agency models, I'm supposed to be in Ireland. In London.
Yeah. And like, I had some very successful, you know, I remember even at the time I had 3 kind of Miss Irelands in a row and stuff like that. And like, on the outside, I suppose to people looking at me on the outside, they would have thought... Oh my God, you've got it. And I was doing some modelling myself. So it was like I had everything.
Yeah.
You know, and I think even some of my family, even my siblings, they were more academic, where I was just like jazz hands and fashion. You know, but they, so they didn't get me.
I understand. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They didn't get me. They just thought I lived in La La Land.
Yes.
You know, if I'd went to live in Los Angeles, they would have thought that's where you belong. You know, I didn't fit with the conventional Irish person that a lot of my family were, you know. So even within that, I kind of still felt I didn't fit. Yeah. You know?
When you realize, like, you are in the wrong body?
Realistically, when I was 3... You know, I just thought...
And that's, I'll be honest with you, it's very important, I think so, to say that loud. Yeah. Because we still live life when the people think, how you can know if you are 3 or 4 years old?
And people are silly when they say that.
Yeah,
because they really are. Because I was the middle child, I had a brother younger, a sister
then
older.
You know, like how...
And I wanted to be my sister. I didn't want to be my brother. Do you know what I mean? Yes. And I wondered why she had the bits that she had and that's why I didn't have them. And I started school when I was 3, just going on 4. You know what I mean? So I remember my first day at school.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? I was 5 when, let's put it this way, I was 5 when when JF Kennedy was killed. I remember standing in the kitchen and my granny dropping a plate and crying because JFK had been assassinated. So, it's stupid when people think that you don't remember things where when you were 3 or 5.
True.
And I remember, and also a very important thing was Granny, every night before we'd kneel down, say our prayers, and we always were given a secret prayer, like our own prayer that we kept to ourselves. And mine always was that I'd wake up in the morning like my sister. And I often ask my brother, I've asked my brother since then, like years later, what was his and my sister's. And my brother's was that he'd find because he wanted to be a drummer, that he'd find a set of drums under his bed. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I can't really remember what my sister's was now, but so mine was that I'd wake up like my sister in the morning. So I think it's very dismissive of adults to think that we don't remember.
Yes, and decide, decide when you will be 18.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it could be a lot of damage, a lot of trauma and even depression.
Yeah.
It's really I think so, it's very good doing the workshops at the moment about the trans life and educate people more, because even myself, I always was open for everybody.
Yeah.
Even my granny always say it doesn't matter what kind of color your skin is. This is always a human and have a blood inside.
Absolutely.
But when I was already twice on the workshops about the trans life, I found it many difficulty for those people. Even if we have trans men, which one it still doesn't get his bottom surgery and he have to use a toilet, and how this is its difficulty. And that's opened my mind more, because a few years ago my friend, which when she lived in California, she told me over there it's the new idea in schools, very early school, the children, they are 4 or 5, to say to the children they, not he or she.
Yeah.
And for me that few years ago I was like, this is crazy, why? But when I listen a little bit from the trans people on that workshops, I realize this is really very important. This is really very important, and we have to educate more adults and give them bigger support.
Absolutely. And you said something, and it's something that I'm really getting out there, and the more talks I do and stuff like that. And there's certainly one that I always go with. People say the toilets.
Yes.
And I use this scenario all the time, right? And it makes sense. People say, oh no, I still think that we should have our male toilets and our female toilets and our disabled toilets. I understand the disabled toilets because it needs that for space, whatever.
Yes.
And I just use this scenario. I say, okay, if you're on a train or you're on a plane, I don't see male and female on your toilets.
Exactly.
And you use it. So what's the difference? Are you going to get off on cloud 9 and go to the loo? No, you're not. So I just think, and people go to me, oh God, I never thought of it that way. I said, exactly.
It's like a stereotype.
Yeah.
Again, they have to be like men or woman.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I came down on a train there. There must have been about 10 toilets on each carriage. I didn't see one that said male or female. Same on an aeroplane. You see them queuing up to go to the loo when the plane is taken off. There's about 5
some people there doesn't wait. They are open.
Exactly.
Excuse me.
And there is nobody saying, I'm not going in there because a man has just come out of there. So I think that is just, I think that they're the kind of things that need to change, and need to change rapidly, because it's not like that it would be that big a change.
That's true. Yeah.
Because we already use toilets that are unisex, for the want of a better word, because we have to, because we can't get off a moving train or a flying plane. So we think that we have the authority over toilets because we're on the ground. It's BS, really.
Yes.
I think,
That's true. Tell me, the transition in Ireland, it's very hard.
It is. I'm kind of coming back. I haven't been here for a long time. I run a couple of clinics in London with Chelsea Westminster Hospital on 56 Dean Street. I'm a peer support worker in Trans Plus. I have set up now a boot camp for trans and
Yeah.
non-binary in Dublin. And I kind of like, I found myself as well. It's amazing how you can find yourself to be a little bit binary.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now that I am female, you know,
Yes.
I can still, and I kind of like originally started my boot camps and it was trans femme. And I kind of get, and then all of a sudden when I came to Ireland, I thought, why am I doing trans femme? It's because I'm comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it because I know? Yes. And I thought, no, that's more BS.
Yeah.
So all my boot camps now are for trans, non-binary, men, boys, girls, whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's amazing how, you know, like, I mean, I can criticize somebody cis for being like that, you know, when I'm quite capable of being like it myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that I have been in touch with HSE Ireland here, and I have told they're very much interested in moving forward with me on certain stuff as well, because and the projects that we do in London and the format that we work with in London with Trans Plus, they're very happy with doing it here. But I'm kind of the biggest, and you're the first I've said this too, right? So this is hot off the press. I am next week. I've made boot camp official,
Wow.
right? So now it's on the official road of becoming a non-profit, which would be amazing.
Yes.
Because then that means that what I want, my dream for boot camp, even in the UK, and I've been doing boot camp in the UK since 2016. You know, Kensington Palace support me, Chelsea Football Club support me. You know, I mean, Gilead Science support me. Obviously, Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. And I have a graduation once a year. But also I get all these corporate companies to come in. And now I've got corporate companies giving internships to trans and non-binary people. Because as I used to say to the press years ago, I said, listen, because this is what they used to call, this was the language. I said, I had a sex change and I had a brain transplant.
That's
You know,
good.
I just could never understand why.
I like your sense of humor,
Yeah.
you know, because the people have to be a little bit sometimes open.
Yeah.
You know, like
Like if somebody is like kind of listen to that and say, oh, you can't say sex change. No, you can't say it now, but that's what was said to me.
yeah.
You know, I have to also use the language that was used to me. You know, how derogatory it was, you know.
But there is like words or question which can be painful, you know, because
Yeah.
not everybody is strong.
But I still think we all
Yeah.
need to lighten up too. And
Yeah.
that goes for the trans community as well.
It's the same like the people, they are so interesting and about, you know, did you do the
Yeah.
top surgery? Did you do a bottom surgery? You
Yeah.
know, like we are not allowed to ask somebody, are you doing a Botox? No, never in my life. I
No.
put inside my face something. You know,
Yeah.
It's still like something private.
But I tell you, sometimes the most, I find, like when I was transitioning, the cruelest people to me at the time
Yeah.
were my own tribe in London. You know, it was actually, if you were pre-op, we don't want to talk to you. But if you're post-op, okay, you're a girl now, we can talk to you. So it was a bit like...
It's like a challenge, to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like being a teenage girl in a schoolyard. And I think also especially when trans femmes start taking hormones,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter whether they're 18 or 81, they automatically become teenage girls. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
You just become irrational. You want to cry at everything. You know, nothing makes sense. Do you know what I mean? You dress. I mean, so I've had some serious dress faux pas, but I was a teenage girl. You know what I mean? And you've got to be able to see that too. And I'm sure it's the same for trans boys as well. It's like all of a sudden they start to get facial hair. It's like reverse puberty. You know, we went through one set of puberty.
Yes.
And we go through a second set. So I know it can be complicated. And I know also as well that I often say to my children in boot camp, you know, you've got to ease up too. You know, like don't be hopping down throats of people that are
Yes.
getting it wrong. You know, for me, I get it wrong. I've misgendered people, and I'm a trans woman. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes I don't get the they or the them right, and I've called them she or he.
Yeah.
And I want to curl up and die in case I'm going to be attacked.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's really important that trans non-binary people too, like also non-binary, the name
Yes.
and the pronoun stuff is pretty new.
Yeah. I like actually idea to, if you have a baby, to name with like no gender name.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Of course, you are still allowed to change your name.
Yeah.
But it's something from the beginning,
Yeah.
you know.
I think it's when you just, that's another thing as well. It's actually, you know, when we're born, especially Catholic, right? We're
Yes.
given our name, and then we're given our baptismal name.
Mm-hmm.
And the Irish people are so, we're so kind of weird. You're given that name, and then you're called by another name.
Yes.
Which is really, and then you make your confirmation, and you get to choose your name.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, like, I mean, some kids, you know, get afflicted with names that their parents put on them. I think there should be a law brought in when you hit 18 that you get to pick your own name, whatever it be. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because
Sometimes we can get some strange
yeah,
names.
that's what I'm saying. Like, we get afflicted with names that,
Yes.
Mum, Dad, what were you
Seriously.
thinking? What were you thinking? You know what I mean? Giving me that name. And especially in today's market, like there are some
Yes.
quite...
Oh my, yeah, there is like, yeah.
Yes.
Like my children, they have a Polish name, but the people always ask me why I name my child like this. I say
Yeah.
like, it's Polish name. And my son have a very old Polish name. It's after my father, after my grandfather. And I remember when I was in hospital giving birth, it was very hard actually, very serious.
Yeah.
And there was so many, you know, like a doctor, nurse, everyone in the room help. And then the one guy said, "What is the name for him?" I said, like, Anthony. Oh my, like, just change the name. This is why he doesn't want to come in. I said, like, it's a good name.
Yeah. It's like my granddaughter's going to be 18 in February. And I love her name and all that. But at the same time, I think every child, when, on their 18th birthday, with their present, they should be given a deed poll thing with the choice to change their name. Because so many people are landed with names that they don't want. Do you know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
So, and I think that's the one glorious thing that maybe trans, non-binary people, that is one thing that we do have power over.
Yeah.
That we can choose and pick a name. But I do say one of my sessions in boot camp is, I have a few. One of them, because I have to have a sense of humour.
Yes.
What got me
That's
to where I
important as
am
well,
is a sense
yeah.
of humour. So one of them is, what's in a name? You know, so some of them will come out with the most extraordinary, crazy names. And I thought, okay, I go with that in a sense. But just imagine you're in a hospital or you're in a doctor's waiting room and your name is being called out.
Yes.
And it's some bizarre kind of porn star name and you're sitting there in a Chanel suit. You know what I mean? Or whatever. And that does make them think. And then another one was Voice of an Angel, or voice, like, you know, because I remember my mum accepted me eventually and saying to me, well, I never thought I'd say it. She says, but you do, you look beautiful. But of course, being an Irish mother, it had to be a backhanded compliment. And then she goes, but is there nothing you can do about that old voice of yours?
But I like deep voice, you know. When I sometimes sick and my voice is going so deep, I say, this is really
I like
nice,
my voice now.
you know?
I like that it's horsey and I
Yeah.
do like it.
Yeah.
So, but it's amazing how
we will learn to like ourselves.
Yes,
You know, I think
yeah.
so. This is the
because I did do the voice, the trans voice, and I found myself I was talking a bit like out of breath and you know, and trying to be, and I thought, oh no, that's not me. Do you know what I mean? Like at least my voice is me.
Yeah,
and
it's
that's
like
it.
me, you know, I came into Ireland 17 years ago.
Yeah.
I moved, of course, only for 5 years. That was a project, like 5 years, and I coming back to Poland. I thought I would speak English. In Ireland, English is completely different dialect. It's something different what I learned in Poland.
Yeah, and that has got to be tough. Yeah. But I totally get that. Like when I would have properly lived here 35 years ago, you know, I mean, it was spot the foreigner. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It was very Irish. You know, I mean, Dublin especially, you know, it was very Irish. It was very white. It was very Yeah, and even people, if you came up from the country, you got lambasted, you know what I mean? Oh, you're a culture. You know, it was like, and now you look at Dublin. I walk the streets of Dublin now, and it's just fabulous.
It is, yeah.
You know, it's fabulous
Yeah.
because there's so many different. Yeah. So and
That's
I think
amazing,
that's good.
actually. But the difference with the communities, like we can learn
Yeah.
from each other. They actually see like another culture, and that's amazing,
Yeah.
actually.
And I think that's something I'd love to see change worldwide. That we don't need all these visas. I think if you're capable of working in any country, and you've something to bring to that country, I think you should be allowed to work in it.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? I think there's
that's
too
true.
many restrictions put on people.
But it's still like so many countries where it's very hard to
Yeah.
live if you are like from LGBT community. It's
Yeah.
very hard.
Yeah.
You can't say loud who you
No.
are. You can't express yourself
No.
because it's too danger. Yeah.
It's a weird one because there's even like I was speaking about this the other day too. There are countries that if I was in right now, I would be thrown from a rooftop. And yet there are other countries as well, like in parts of India, that I'm classed as sacred, as blessed, because I'm two spirits that have lived in one body. You know, there's so many
Yes.
different ways
Yes,
that.
yes, yes. The people still believe something was supposed to
Yeah.
be finished like 100 years ago.
And I think even as bad and all as Ireland was to me and to my thing, I think in fairness to it, you know, I'm Irish. I love being Irish. I never wanted to leave. You know, I had no choice. But I think,
But that was actually the one of the hard story in your life again.
yeah,
When you was very successful,
yeah,
very happy, and you lost everything just
Overnight.
overnight.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think and I say it because I'm Irish. I can only say it about Irish people. Do you know? And it's a word I use as well, and it's a really important one. Fear.
Yeah.
Fear is crippling. If you know, fear changes everything. And I think with me at that time, people were just afraid. It was like,
Yeah.
what is that? They'd never really heard of it before. You know, it was something brand new. You know, I mean, the only thing that you could come up against me back then in Ireland was a drag queen called Mr. Pussy, who is now one of my best friends. He's actually my mom, and lovely, and you know, but they had never. I remember, I think even my mom, bless her, saying to me when I was dressing first, because at first I was very androgynous, you know, and the press would write about me and say gender bender. So that's why I was so kind of shocked that they were shocked that I did bend the gender, because they were fucking saying it long enough about me, you know, and then all of a sudden I do it and they're like, but I remember my mom saying to me, but she looked lovely in the clothes and the dress. Why would you be going and having all them operations? And I think nobody realised that those operations were things that made me complete, because I had to pretend to be a boy. I've never had to pretend to be a girl. And that's the reality of it. You know, I remember my poor Auntie Sybil, you know, when it got so bad here, when the press had done what they had done and all of that, and my career was gone, and what are they going to do with me? And then, you know, finding out about my HIV, not the press, but my family. And they just thought, oh my God. And then I was brought to a monastery to be, I suppose, blessed, but almost like they thought that it to be exorcised. They thought an exorcism. I genuinely, it was outside Mullingar. I never forget it. I've been brought there and been brought into this monastery and been brought around and blessed and anointed and all these crazy things been done to me and kind of telling my aunt to take me away now and say these prayers. And I loved my Auntie Sybil. She was great because she was as traumatized by it as I was. And the minute we left and got into the car, she says, we need a drink. So we went into, but that's how it was like, I think it triggered, what that then triggered for me was the Christian brothers telling me I was evil.
Yeah.
So here I am again now in my 20s being exercised because all I want to be is me, you know. And I always say, and it's so true, you know, for all, I like everything I've done to me has not harmed anyone else, and yet I've had to pay the greatest price to be me.
Your story is so motivated for the other people, because
Yeah.
now I can see like a strong woman, activist, which want work and just help to the other people. And to be honest, like some story like yours, they doesn't have really happy ending. Then it's so many suicides.
Yeah, I remember and that's another thing that's so true. And I have been, I hate the word robbed because it makes me sound like a victim, but I have been definitely deprived of proper relationships. Another thing I was deprived of was having a bank account for years. You know, like any other normal human being, being able to save, get a deposit, like to own my own home. You know what I mean? To be a part of society. That was all taken from me. I didn't qualify for that. Do you know what I mean? I went to try and I had a bank account though before. You know what I mean? I had a penthouse. I had a Jeep. I had everything. But then everything was frozen and taken from me, like everything. And it wasn't until, and then of course, being kind of rejected from society. And it, like I was in London, and the only thing open to me then was, you know, I'd gone from being in the newspapers and magazines like every week and every month to literally being in the same magazine, but for being demonized. And then finding myself on the streets of London with nothing, and having to kind of mix with these wonderful people. They became wonderful people, but they were street people from Soho, from, you know, they were in their teens, but they had grown up on these streets. There were rent boys and prostitutes and everything, and they were like 17 and 18. I was in my 20s. Some of them were only 16. And I found myself that was the only place for me. And before I knew it, that's what I was doing. And I was fighting a corner that they had kind of grown up in that world. Some of them had come from their moms being sex workers, you know, and their dads being pimps, and that kind of, that industry, you know.
It's very tough when you have everything here.
Yeah, I had come from being a posh kid. Do you know what I mean? To then have to turn into a street kid, or a street woman at the time. And at that stage, I wouldn't have even been like a major drinker, which was probably more weird being Irish than anything else, really. To becoming, you know, drinking to numb the pain. Then I discovered drugs, which numbed me more. So in a very short period of time, I was a heroin addict. I was a crack addict. I was living on the streets of Soho. I was working on them. I was in my 20s. I was diagnosed with AIDS at the time, not HIV. I was told I had 2 years to live. I fought all that. I eventually got my lower surgery done. And I thought that would change things here. My family, I thought would change everything. But I suppose by the time I was fully Rebecca, oh God, it's so, you know, it still gets me because it still hurts.
It is.
You know,
even if I listen to you, it just make me so angry inside. Like, why do people doing something like that?
And by the time I did get to me, I was so damaged. You know, I was so damaged by what I had to do to become me. You know, I would often say too, you know, sex work and all of that I did, it was not on my to-do list, but it was what I had to do to survive. You know, the things, and some people there are people still, even within my community, that didn't have to go through what I went through. And the reason they didn't have to go through what I went through, because I went through it and I changed things, and I definitely genuinely want to be recognised for that, because that nearly went by and by, and it was COVID changed that,
Yes.
People had forgotten I even existed, you know what I mean? And there are some people who were actually able to keep their jobs. They were able to stay in their marriages. They were able to transition. They didn't have to lose everything.
Yeah. And now even they are able to marriage.
Yeah.
That's amazing, actually.
I know I was deprived of all that, but you know what? For me, I'm fine with it too, because when you're a trailblazer, which I know I am, there's a price to pay. Do you know what I mean? And I had to pay the ultimate price. But I actually don't have resentment for it, because I'm sitting here. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm in Kilkenny. I'm in, when I see things like this happening, seeing what you're doing, then I can kind of say to myself, it's worth it. And also that it's happening in my lifetime. I'm not Oscar Wilde, God love him, that everything happened after he passed.
Yes.
I often feel like I'm the female version of him, in the sense of, you were like, all I was short of done was being put in prison. Do you know what I mean? For what I did. And I think it's great to see that change, and that I'm a part of that change. And I did a talk 3 years ago, because I'm 64, and it was a trans community, women from California. And they were introducing me, and I was introduced as Rebecca, and I think I was 60, just going on 61. And there was a big round of applause and I thought, oh my God, I never thought in my life I'd be clapped for being 61. But the irony, then she says, the reason I'm clapping Rebecca, because she's 61, because do you know how many trans women get to live to that age? And it really kind of hit me then, so things like that have to change, none of us should ever, and I did try to commit suicide 3 times. I was on a life support machine in Chelsea and Westminster Hospital 17 years ago. And I stopped drinking and drugging and everything. So I'm clean and sober 17 years.
Well done.
But 17 years later, I'm working at that hospital I was on a life support machine on. I've been working there for the last 4 years, I was in Glasgow last weekend speaking at the conference by one of the professors from Chelsea and Westminster Hospital that wanted me there to speak. He was the same professor was the one that was standing over me on the life support machine when I came to. Sometimes I remember there was a saying I used to hate. Oh, they're not ready for you yet. Your time's not up. There's still...
Yeah.
And I used to really resent that. But now I know today that, yeah, I'm meant to be here. And there's still stuff to do. You know what I mean?
It's a lot. Same like with the Project David.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. And the main thing, let's educate more people.
Yeah, but I think people also need to know, because sometimes people just think, oh, there's more to do. There's more to... It's like...
Yes.
Well, what's been done? And I'm here to prove that things have changed and things are changing, because otherwise people aren't going to fight. Allies are not going to... They're going to say, well, why are we bother fighting for you if nothing is changing? But I do want to say to the allies out there, it has changed a lot, in 30 years. It still has a way to go, and we still need to get...
It's a big jump, actually, from the 30 years. It's
yeah,
huge,
but who'd have thought I'd be speaking in Kilkenny? You know what I mean? Even 5 years ago.
And in the TV show.
Yeah, and my own TV
amazing.
show. I mean, that's history making. So I've made history a few times at this stage, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I just feel that if, me being visible on TV now as a trans person, that's just opened the door again for others. That door now is no longer closed. It was like the passport. I changed the passport. I was fully female with my lower surgery, my vagina, everything. And I was still going around with a passport that had my female name, but sex male. And because I've been so humiliated in the airport in Greece in 2001 or 2, that I came back and I went I went in screaming and like literally screaming and shouting, and went crazy at the way I had been treated. And in fairness, the passport office changed my passport within 6 weeks to female, and by default, that then changed it legally for everyone. So I just think sometimes,
you are the first trans-slave woman, in Ireland.
Yeah.
Amazing, actually.
So it's,
Especially your history, it's like the parts of them, they are really cruel and tough.
Yeah.
And,
but now I get on a train or I get on a plane, and nothing ever kind of, I walk into a woman's toilets, or I never, ever, ever think now that somebody is looking at me because I'm a trans woman.
But you are strong, I can see.
I'm strong, and if they're looking at me,
really.
they're looking at me because they say, she looks good.
Oh, I can say, that's
Do you know
true.
what I mean? And I think
when you came in, I just saw like your coat and everything. I said like, this is a style and I love it.
Yeah.
And your hair. I'm sorry. I'm jealous.
And that is what we need. That is what it's about. But I do think, as much and all as we kind of sometimes seem to have a go at society, I think trans, non-binary people, I think we are in a place where we can change things hugely.
But together,
not apart. I hate divide.
Yeah.
I don't do divide. I don't do cis people going that way and that, or I don't do kind of like where we just like. I like if I'm even working with trans people in clinics like I do I like a mix of people. Do you know what I mean?
That's important as well.
Really
I
is.
think so. Sometimes
Otherwise it becomes tribal and it becomes all this stuff and nobody gets anywhere then.
And everyone have a different experience, different history in his life, and they can just say, and they will be again motivated for another person.
And even like on Instagram, Twitter, anything, I don't retaliate on, the TERFs or whatever they're called. I don't even know how to pronounce it properly because I don't care. Do you know what I mean?
I think so. It's the moment in our life when we
Is it a TERF? To me, a TERF was. I think we had TERF. It's for what you put on a fire, but it's TERFs or whatever. I don't want to know about it because I don't even want to give them my airspace.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I think we just need to move on. Because at the end of the day, people need to know you're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. You know what I mean? And this world was made for us to live in.
Yeah, and enjoy
our life. And enjoy it.
Yeah.
Let's have fun as well.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
That's true. That's amazing, actually. I got your book as well.
I know, I see.
And I have just a question. What was interesting for me, because it's like his name is
I'm so
Rebecca.
glad you brought that up. Do you know what? And I genuinely am really pleased that you actually brought that up. Because I wrote that in 2009, before pronouns, before all this new stuff, right? And people just said, and I'll tell you the story behind it. But then recently, somebody says to me, I don't think you should have called your book, His Name is Rebecca. And I said, why? Because you're she, her. And I went, you know what? They're all driving me mad. I said, the reason it's called His Name is Rebecca. My niece, Eleanor, when she was 4 or 5, and I was transitioning, and she lives in Granard, and my sister overheard her out in the garden playing with her friend, and me after being in the Sunday world, and her friend saying to her, quite confused, saying to Eleanor, well, is he your auntie or is he your uncle? And she got really irate back at her friend and put her hands on her hips and says, I don't know. All I know is his name is Rebecca.
That's brilliant.
But it's amazing that how innocently I used that as the name of the book. And then how in recent years, that's only over a decade, how politically people are coming at me.
And everything have to be politically correct
because it's his name is Rebecca. So that just goes to show you how life can change even in a decade. But I am writing book 2.
Very good.
And I'm certain. But if somebody asks me my pronouns, I say she, her, queen. That's that. You know, and I think, though, I do think that we will get to a stage. I think the pronoun stuff and all that, I think it is important. And I think, I suppose when I would have been...
some people, they are very soft as well.
Yeah, and it is nice to be able to kind of identify, because there was a time when I definitely could never really identify as he. And I wasn't quite she. So I think, in fairness, you know, I think if I'd had they, them, especially when I was kind of gender bendering, they would have really, they would have been very comfortable for me to have at that time. You know?
Are you happy now with yourself?
So happy, so happy. Sometimes I do have to pinch myself. Do you know what I mean? And I may be 64. Well, I call myself 64.
Nice. I like it. I will start using that.
And I think my mentality is probably in its 30s.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And that's amazing.
Yeah, so yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Rebecca.
you.
I hope so we can meet again in the future.
Yeah, and if there's ever anything I can do to help,
Thank you very
I'm
much.
here.
That's really important, especially for the Project David, to show your story. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best in
Thank
your
you.
life, all happiness, and
Thank
be
you.
yourself.
And
Be
well
Rebecca.
done for everything you're doing too.
Thank you very much.
Speak soon again, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and see you next week.